All right. So, Heather Pearce Campbell, my special guest today, is a warrior mama, nature lover, and dedicated attorney and legal coach for world changing entrepreneurs. Based in Seattle, she is a mom to two little wild munchkins and founder of Pearce Law, home to her legal practice. She is also the creator of the legal website Warrior, an online business that provides legal education and support to information entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, online business educators, speakers, and authors around the US and the world. She hoards information, paper, and books while secretly dreaming of becoming a minimalist and relishes an occasional rare night with her hubby when the kiddos are miraculously asleep and she can soak up HGTV without guilt. Heather is also the host of Guts, Grit, and Great Business podcast, which I was a guest on most recently. All right, Heather, welcome to the Making Magic podcast. It's great to see you again.
Awesome. Good to see you. And I love the title, Making Magic. That is fun.
It's what we're here to do. And, magic looks different in many different ways. And today we're going to be talking about legal magic.
Mhm.
Really cool story. So, as you know, we've been growing Magic Kids for the last 3 years, and we're the first fair pay publishing company. We're trying to flip the model on his head where companies like Spotify pay their artists like 0.001 cents, maybe even less per play. It's very
Mhm.
hard. I have friends who get a million plus plays on their channel and they barely make a couple grand a month with that. And so we're trying to flip that. And it's complex contracts for our voice actors, our musicians, our authors, illustrators, producers, etc., who are all contributing to every asset that we have inside of the Magic Kids app. And we're talking about like massive royalty shares. We're talking about trying to make it so it's equal pay or it's fair pay based on the number of subscribers and the number of engagements your pieces of content inside the app are getting. And I originally hired my lawyer, who's a very old school business lawyer. They still don't even do online banking for paying him. You got to mail in a check sort of thing. And so I tried to explain to him our entire vision, and it was impossible for him to grasp this different type of
Mhm.
business model. And so I spent a lot of money on lawyer fees. And I ended up getting introduced to a friend of mine now who's down in LA, who's a lawyer. And he wrote out he's an entertainment lawyer. He works at a
Mhm.
big entertainment company and does all their negotiations and contracts. And he ended up hooking us up. And the value of having proper legal advice and having really well written contracts is such, especially for entrepreneurs that are like earlier stages.
Mhm.
It's so valuable. And I mean, we've had so many different partnerships, which I want to talk about, like partnership contracts today.
Mhm.
The work that you do is like the behind the curtains, probably less appreciated than you should be by the people that you do work for, until it's something that's like, oh, you just saved my ass. But like the preparation work that you do to help a company so that their ass doesn't need to be saved is just something that I am now, 20 years as an entrepreneur. I have so much appreciation for somebody that does good
Mhm.
lawyer work. And so I'm excited for this conversation. And for those of you tuning in, make sure you tune in and listen to this, because there's going to be some valuable stuff to all of you listening that probably want to avoid the topic of legal and lawyers. So
Mhm.
thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. And I will say, the journey that you've just described of like what it takes to get to an attorney who is the right fit, understand your business model, understand like there is some pain involved in that. And that's one of the unfortunate parts of what I call the traditional legal industry. And it is why, my recommendation to people always is it's worth that early investment of your own time and connecting with attorneys to find the one that when you talk to them, they click, they see your world in the way that you see your world. And of course, they're going to bring other information into that world, but they can embrace your view of business, your approach. And that's just really so important to like be able to work with people who are aligned to your vision. And if you don't, if you sell yourself short by signing up for support or services with somebody who's not quite there, can be really painful. So kudos to you for like sticking with that path and really figuring out what it takes to find somebody who can support you in the right way.
Yeah, it's such a relief. Like he brought such a gift to the table, and this idea that I had of like I want it to be fair, and I understand in my brain how to get the calculations properly so that it feels like a fair spread across the play. But to communicate that in a legally binding contract to hundreds of artists that are contributing their gifts to this thing, that's a whole other beast. And it's not something that I could just get ChatGPT to write up for me, because it's like it's gotta stick. It's gotta be right. So
Totally.
yeah.
And I think that, more and more, like you talked about your first business attorney being pretty old school, and that's been the case for a long time. A lot of business attorneys kind of came from that old school world of like, wait, online business, create, like, what is all this business talk where I don't really understand this new business model and what people are doing? And so that was the opportunity that I had to come into the information space and provide legal services in a different way as well. And we're seeing, luckily, more what I will call holistic lawyering
Mm,
happening, right?
yeah.
But don't sell yourself short. Like if your view is that kind of approach to your business, connect with somebody who also has that holistic view that can meet you where you are and help you set up these documents that, even for people, I tell my own clients, like, look, there really is no such thing as a bulletproof contract,
Yeah.
but there are ways to do it better. And if you're somebody who really believes in relationships first, which I can just tell by having connected with you several times previously, you're a relationships first guy.
100%. Yeah.
That's the most important thing that will protect you, right?
Yeah.
Legal is there as a backup, but if you're not a relationships first person, you're going to have some heartache. If you care about money or things more than people, you're going to have some lessons that will change that model for you.
Not fun lessons either.
No, they're not fun lessons.
You
But
don't want to learn those ones. Yeah.
no, you don't. But that's why I also say, choose people that you work with in business, that you work with as clients,
Yeah.
that you like, that you care about that relationship first, so that you guys have a mutual understanding of the importance of the relationship, which
Yeah.
will give you a really strong foundation to work from once you put that proper documentation in place to also support that relationship.
This is a great lead into a conversation. So inside our Magic Mind coaching community today, I was just talking about the alternative path that I've taken, because as you know, like I
Mhm.
left social media 7 years ago. And I came up with all of these alternative models. I didn't leave social media having already made it and have my bank accounts lined with cash that I could just hire my team and we could go forth and prosper. It was like it was still a very crunchy time. It was, and so I was talking about how taking the group through an exercise around like what are the gaps that you have to fill in to get your business to the next level. Is it having somebody be your marketing person? Is it hiring an assistant to be able to take on a bunch of the tedious task work so you can free up your stuff to the higher leverage point stuff? And then mentioning like, okay, so you've identified the gaps. Imagine that person was here. There's different ways. Yeah, you could pay them an hourly rate. You could also bring them in as a business partner and give them a revenue share on a project. You could have them, you could do a trade of services and like swap value. Like you don't have to have a bank account full of cash flow coming in order to figure out how filling those gaps can work. If you find the right people and you're clear on the vision, there's a lot of ways that I've done it. And like how I've built Magic Media over the years, like say I'm launching a new program or a course. If I didn't have the cash flow to hire one of my buddies to be my videographer, I'd be like, great, I'm going to give you 30% on this training. And you just
Mhm.
keep that cash and hopefully we all win. And if they feel good with that, With some of our producers right now, we have ridiculously talented producers at Magic Kids. They get a low hourly rate for the work that they do. They should be getting paid a really high hourly rate. They take a lower hourly rate, but then they get revenue share inside the royalty agreements. So um, I guess what I'm trying to get to is what kind of work or due diligence or what recommendations would you have if somebody, say, was going to engage in one of these alternative styles of partnerships that aren't just like paying a contractor an hourly rate and they're being more creative with their resources? What would you encourage them to have set up legally before beginning those different types of partnerships?
It's such a great story and great example of how creative we get to be in our business building journeys, and also a great example of demonstrating kind of this new model of collaboration,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think there's lots of ways that we get to have what are called, in all of these that you described, right, an exchange of value happening in our business. And I also, like in all of my teaching, it's one of my main points. Those exchanges of value need to be documented. They need to
Mm-hmm.
be protected. You need to have a contract in place for every exchange of value. So again, back to the relationship first perspective. If you're a relationship first person, all of those engagements are starting with conversations,
Yeah.
right? And depending on the nature of the collaboration, right? I'm going to tell a lot of people you should have non-disclosure agreements involved so that if you're sharing business ideas that are really proprietary to you in the process of bringing these people on board, you really do need to treat your business like a business in that way, so that, because in the process of exploring conversations, you may learn like somebody's just not a fit.
Yeah.
And if you've already disclosed, something precious about your systems or your business or an idea you have, could be off to the races for that person,
Mm.
right? So there are some preliminary things that from a business perspective you want to have in place, and a non-disclosure agreement is really key. It's a simple document, just says basically in the context of these preliminary discussions, any ideas that I share are mine, they're proprietary, you agree not to use them or do anything with them, right? And a lot of business partnerships actually end up going sideways because there's not that level of clarity at the start.
Yeah.
So at every point, it really is about clarity. And we achieve clarity through our words, through our conversations, but also through backup documentation.
Yeah.
And that's really what your documentation should be, is supporting the conversations that are taking place, right? So you wouldn't share ideas before you have that NDA agreement in place. It would be along the lines of, hey, I've got some ideas. I think you could be a great fit. Before we can have a meeting and talk about it, I need you to sign this NDA so that we're free to talk about it and explore a potential collaboration.
Is that one of the templates that you might happen to
Mm.
offer inside of your
Totally.
programs?
Yep.
Amazing.
It's
That's great.
where it's where I mean, I had a conversation with a woman yesterday and she's like, I am in Madison, Wisconsin. My potential business partners in Tel Aviv. We may be setting up a business together. We're not sure yet. I said, do you have an NDA in place? Nope. I was like, first step, you get that thing in place. And then with any other potential collaborators, you put that in place with every single one before your very important conversations. And so, because what can happen in that early development of IP, because let's be clear, in those meetings, any of those meetings, new ideas can come out of those, right?
Yeah.
And people can get very possessive around an idea that they think is theirs,
Yeah.
right? And so that is also why having that documentation that helps you achieve that clarity is really helpful, because down the road, what often gets in the way of a startup or a potential business partnership going well is somebody having a misunderstanding about who owned the IP, whose IP was brought to the table, etc. So
Yeah.
clarity, clarity, clarity all day long in our
Yeah.
conversations, in our invitations, in our documentation.
We've been going through that with a couple big negotiations for Magic Kids strategic partnerships. And so we've created a document in um, in English speaking sense, the
Mm,
priorities of like what is most important. So the partner, like what are their responsibilities? What are their requests? What are they agreeing
mhm,
to? What Magic Kids responsibilities? What our operational contributions to the partnerships are? What our
mhm,
marketing contributions are? What we're like basically just like nailing it out, like what we're doing for marketing, what we're doing in the collaboration, what we're approving of versus not approving of, what we're responsible for versus what they're responsible for,
mhm.
what the event, the investment is. And so we've got this document, and it's like, you know, a few pages long of like, here's all the bullet points that we've talked about that matter most to us in the context of this agreement. And then that will go to the lawyer to like spell it all out.
Yep. No, absolutely. And you've just described in kind of a, a high level walkthrough the process that I recommend for anybody, whether it's an official, I'm putting air quotes around like joint venture
Yeah.
or or something else that is a collaborative approach to whether it's an individual project or a whole business model, right?
Yeah.
If you are approaching it the right way, you're putting a lot of time into those conversations about what happens if, right? What are you bringing to the table? What am I bringing to the table? And getting clarity around what is the real benefit in that exchange. And it's
Yeah.
usually based on people bringing different strengths, different resources, different skills to the table, right?
Yeah.
And just having real clarity around what does that look like? Because where things go wrong is people having the wrong idea about what's going to happen or who's going to do what,
Mm, yeah.
right? And it's because there's
Definitely.
like a set of expectations that went unsaid, and then suddenly somebody's falling down compared to those expectations that you never really clarified out loud. Right. And so, and it's the same with any client services that go sideways. The reason they do is because something occurred that was different than what they thought was going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where people problems become legal problems.
Yeah. Yeah, which is no fun. Um I've gone through a few business divorces over the years. Um
Mhm.
and I've been very fortunate that we've never needed to bring in legal support. And these were business divorces with like good friends,
Mhm.
handshake deals, like literally wrote our contracts on a piece of paper and signed the bottom sort of thing. And in the end, it was like I've always kind of been the visionary. I'm going this way. I'm recruiting you. You're coming in. You're going to play this role. We're going to do this thing together and we'll get further together. And so like some of the buddies that I've hired who are incredibly talented, it was like they were doing this to make money and not necessarily
Mhm.
because that's their dharma. And there
Mhm.
would get to a certain point in the project where or the business where it's just like I actually need to go do my thing now. And so those business partnerships ended with a business divorce. Um, and if it was a toxic relationship without love and clear communication, and each of us seeking, like, what is the actual mutually beneficial way for us to part ways based on everything that we've done here, um, it could have been very messy and terrible. So, I guess
Mhm.
my question to you is um, when engaging in these types of joint venture partnerships or business partnerships,
Mhm.
what kind of questions do you want to ask yourself around the exit strategy? Like if one partner is ready to depart ways, to identify like the okay, if you're leaving, then here's some of the things that we've thought through.
Totally. And this is so important. You raise a really important piece of business building generally, which is that just like romantic relationships, most of us don't approach a business partnership planning for the end.
Yeah.
It's just not really human nature to approach it that way. We get
Yeah.
optimistic, we have big ideas, we approach things with a lot of enthusiasm, right? And so that's how things usually initially kick off. And I have one of the other templates on my site is it's called the JV joint venture agreement and the preparation guide. And I tell people all day long, the value in that purchase is in the preparation guide, right? Almost like regardless of whether you end up putting the joint venture agreement in place, which you should do if you're doing a joint venture, or any kind of collaboration, you want something similar. But the guide is like, I think, 4 or 5 pages of questions that you should go
Mm,
through if you're putting a potential collaboration in place. And, in addition to what you've said about like, how does this end? Is, what are our roles? What are we each contributing? What are our obligations? Like if it
mhm.
comes to we're jointly sharing in the marketing fund or, the operation fund, and we need to infuse additional cash into this project. Who's doing that? Right. So it's all of those questions about how things are going to work, what our roles are, et cetera. But it's also what dispute resolution process are we going to put in place if we
Mhm.
have problems, if we lock heads? Because even if you can't agree on the outcome ahead of time, you can agree on a process that you will both participate in to reach a neutral or mediated outcome, right?
Yeah.
So even looking at things like procedurally, there's some really important things that you can do and agree to in advance,
Yeah.
just anticipating at some point we're going to disagree. At some point, there will be problems. How are we going to handle this? Right. And it might be very different. Like, let's pretend that you have a business partner or collaborator who gets really sick or suddenly has to, really put a lot more time into their parenting role. That might be that exit, and how you handle that might be very different than if that person just gets bored and they're just feeling done with
And they're
it.
dropping the ball.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and they're just dropping the ball. And it's like, okay, well, in the first instance, maybe you would still continue on having some ownership or some revenue share because, this decision was involuntary and we know you're committed. In the second instance, like, oh, you get bored and just walk away. Maybe there's a way that I buy you out, or you have a payment that occurs and we break ways and I'm able to go on and still run the project or the business or whatever, right? So having those what if conversations are really important because you will learn about the person in the not only at the time that you're exploring that conversation, but even if you don't get to all the what ifs, you can round out the edges of an understanding of like how we generally would approach this if it looked
Yeah.
like this versus it looked like this, right? And
Yeah.
then you have a much better plan in place because you've talked about it. It's not like a big surprise to anybody because you're like, oh, remember when we talked about like if somebody just got bored and walked away, we'd do it this way,
Yeah.
right?
And I mean, there's people like you who have seen this happen again and again and again. You're kind of like, here's typically how that scenario plays out. Here's three different ways that scenario will play out, and here's how
Mhm.
we suggest that you buffer yourself so that you're not gonna both have a pain in your ass if that does happen.
Totally. Yeah. Because ultimately, the goal is that the idea, the business, the concept, the project goes on to thrive,
That's right.
regardless of who manages it, right? That's the power of caring for good ideas in the world that turn into a business. And so, if you draft it or at least have the conversation from that perspective, just like you said, kind of putting an outline together of here's what we've talked about, here's what we've generally agreed on, and you take it to an attorney who can put that into the proper format for you and really, help facilitate the care and the growth of that relationship.
Yeah. So for folks that are earlier on and
Mm.
cash flow is like month to month sort of thing, and they're trying to figure out what to invest in, what legal pieces, regardless of where they are on the journey, if like they are in the cash flow is strap part,
Mm.
what legal stuff do you recommend that every entrepreneur, creator, coach, etc., that's doing this type of
Mm.
work is like make sure you have these pieces in place within the next year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And great question. So starting like at that idea phase, non-disclosure agreement,
Yeah.
starting at the phase that you're actually bringing people into any portion of the development, collaboration, part of it is being really clear about, are they collaborator or are they an independent contractor that's just delivering a piece of it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a distinction. Some people are going to be those folks where you're like, you're going to grow with the project and I want you involved the whole way, versus others where it's like, I just need a web page designed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Very different. Service
Yeah.
provider, independent contractor type. So I always recommend having a great independent contractor agreement in place so that as much as possible while you're in the ideation phase, you're not over committing
Yeah.
to the ownership or the collaboration piece until you really have the model figured out.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it just having those, like with Magic Kids, now all of our contracts are templates and
Mhm.
it's the same agreement every time.
That's
Um,
right. They
and
become working tools in
that's
your
right.
business, right?
Yeah.
You get to know them and you're like, oh, this is just the system and and you develop a comfort with them. And that's what I want everybody to have with the legal documents that they use in their business. They
Yeah.
really are tools.
Yeah. And I would say anybody that's doing basic coaching work,
Mhm.
if you're providing a service that like on your landing page, you have a promise and somebody's paying you money to hire you for that service, just having an agreement in place that you can lean into if they need to,
That's
like
right. That's
it's
right.
such an important thing.
It's so important. And the number of times that I have supported a client by getting their basic client services agreement in place and then
Yeah.
having them not need anything else for years
Yeah.
because they're just in their business, building their business, doing that service, right? So, non-disclosure agreement, independent contractor agreement for any of those early parts that you hire out, a core client services agreement so that
Yeah.
I call it protecting your moneymaker. What is the one thing that you're primarily doing to make money? Start there and get that protected. That's going to be your client service agreement. From there, people usually start to branch out. Maybe they do group events, maybe they do live workshops, maybe they do more online education, right? At some point, if you're developing a heavy online presence, you'll need my version of it is called the website protection package, but you'll need website terms. You'll need a legal privacy policy that's compliant with the rules and regulations, not only of where you live, but who you're serving,
Yeah.
along with other documentation, like you mentioned, making promises on your website, having proper disclaimers, having proper language around how people can view the language and the information that you're sharing, right? So there's a variety of things, but really it's about looking at the way that you're growing and expanding your business and covering each of those areas.
Yeah. So let's carry on with that and just induce just like a homeopathic dosage of fear, just for fun. Um, what are some of the biggest legal risks that online entrepreneurs and creators face that they might not be aware of? Because I think that's like, and it seems like laws are constantly changing with all these censorship bills and information acts and all the things. So it's like it feels like a very crazy changing landscape and I'm kind of like blinders on just try to do my thing right now. So this question is partially for me is like what don't I know right now and how the landscape's changed, because when I started 20 years ago it was a wild west. There was no rules, there was no
Mhm.
regulations. It was just like you want to sell something on the internet, you sell something on the internet.
Oh
So
my gosh, it's so true, right? Kids still can throw up a website overnight from their mom's garage or basement or whatever and be in business. And it's
yeah.
like, for folks that don't know what they're doing, that's the equivalent of driving, 70 or 80 miles down the road per hour and not having a seatbelt on. Like there's pretty much not anything that you can do currently in the online or the real world of business and not have rules apply to you. So the number one biggest risk is refusing to look in the legal category. And people stay here for far too long. Like, oh, I'm going to focus on marketing. I'm going to focus on this over here. And they're not actually building up the structure that's going to support their business in going faster.
Yeah.
Right. So don't, like, it really is not Pandora's box. There's a map for businesses when it comes to legal protection. And even though at first it might feel a little big, it's really, once you break it down into categories, there's only a few places that you need to look. So
Mm-hmm.
don't be afraid to look. You just need to connect with somebody like me or others like me who have kind of an alternative legal model where they do a lot of educating up front to really like get your mind around what it is that you need in your particular business.
Yeah.
And then start with the basics. The other thing I remind people is it doesn't have to be done all at once. There is a way for you to kind of stair step in the same way that you stair step in, let's call it financial supports. Nobody launches a business and has all their accounting figured out and has the perfect CPA in place and a bookkeeper that they love. Most people don't, right? That takes time to
Yeah.
build out, connect with the right people, etc. You can stair step in your legal protections as well. So just know that it needs to be part of your business building map. And that way you'll tackle it from a much more strategic, empowered perspective, right? But getting to the risks, because you asked me, what are the big risks that we don't know about, right?
If there are any, maybe it's not that crazy. Maybe there's nothing sneaky lurking in the corners, but just
I
in
mean,
case
I
there
think
is.
once we go through it, people are going to be like, yeah, some part of me knew this, you know. If you are doing any amount of, let's call it like online list building, a lot of online marketing, you know, you have to pay attention to privacy regulations. You
Hmm.
just have to. It's a very quickly evolving landscape. States are passing new laws, nations are passing new laws. It's just not something that you can ignore, because even with a small list of 500 people, I put small list in air quotes, if you have a data breach, on average, you know, that's going to cost you at least $200 per client record to fix properly from a legal perspective, from reporting requirements, bringing in attorneys, sending out notices. So there are rules around what happens when things go sideways from a data protection perspective, and you just don't get to ignore that.
Now, with
Um,
that in mind, you know, if you're
mhm,
using, say, a ConvertKit or Mailchimp or Aweber, and you're putting all those contacts through those companies are kind of set up to protect you and that client information. Are like, who would be liable in the case if,
mhm.
say, ConvertKit got hacked and all of your client data got scooped from ConvertKit? Are you liable for those contacts, or is ConvertKit liable for those contacts?
Yeah, great question. So it probably depends on how the hack occurred. So, for example, if you did not properly manage your own password protection,
Yeah.
or if somebody back-ended your WordPress site because you're not keeping up with it and you have third-party apps connected to that site and they somehow got access, depends on how it happens. But
Yeah.
generally, any of those companies like, you know, Aweber, like even any of the processors used to process payment, to do anything else related to managing your list, communicating with your list, taking payments from people, they're all going to be considered under the law, basically data processors. You're the data controller as the business owner with that particular list.
Yeah.
You're ultimately responsible, including for the data processors that you choose. But it's really about, you know, are you staying up with industry standards and what it takes to protect your online business? And it, you know, it's like any other category. A little information goes a long way if you can take the right steps to manage all your passwords through a password manager. You should not be having these on some Google document somewhere.
Yeah.
They need to be in a lockdown password manager with a mega password attached, right?
Yeah.
And so there are certain steps that you can take that will greatly minimize your risk for that kind of thing, but you just can't ignore it.
Yeah.
You just can't be a business owner with an intent to grow and build a responsible business and ignore certain parts of your business.
Yeah. We used LastPass, which is
Hmm.
like so user friendly and easy to get all that
Totally.
stuff in. And I know for most of the people listening to this, you probably have 20 to 30 passwords in 20 to 30 places. You don't have to do it all at once. I just like slowly over time would just like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
logging into this account. I'm putting that in LastPass. And I just like take the
Yes.
extra 60 seconds to put the new password in. When we have people joining our team or giving access to specific accounts for somebody to come to a project in a website or whatever, it's like we're sending them the LastPass so they don't actually have the login credentials.
That's right.
Very
That's right.
easy.
They're very easy. And then you're much more in compliance with the privacy laws that require you to limit that type of access. Like if
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessary, none of us should be disclosing any inside portion of our business to a service provider unless they actually have to do something with that information,
Yeah.
right? So, and then the other thing is, you know, within your privacy policy, if you're doing it the right way, you're disclosing who else has access to the information that you collect inside your business. Because if you're working with any kind of service provider, other data processors, right, you have to disclose that. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's various things that are just when you think about it logically, you're like, okay, that is what a responsible person does. And it shouldn't really be that surprising. But a lot of people skip those basic steps of getting some of those essential protections in place at the start.
Yeah.
Um, So, and while we're talking about the online stuff, because the other risk that a lot of people face online is that they launch a new business, they launch a course or a program or something that is really heavily IP related, and they don't yet have their IP protections in place. And I just tell people, like, look, if you plan to be good at what you're doing, and by the way, you should plan to be good at what you're doing, you're going to get eyeballs on your business. You're going to get people that follow what you're doing. You're going to get people that really like your ideas. You're also going to get people that ethically don't understand. They don't get to just take those ideas and put them into their own business and use them as their own. I
Yeah.
have this ongoing joke. Like I keep thinking one day that I'm going to wake up and the entirety of the internet is going to like have ethics. I'm just telling you, it's like not how the world works. Like there are still so many people online, even in the quote unquote conscious business world, that do highly unethical things.
Yeah.
And so you have to really just plan for that from the start and say, how serious am I about this? Do I feel really possessive over this, this brand name or this signature program or product or service name? And if you do, go get it registered. If you're creating a whole new course and you've put your heart and your soul into that course and it's going to be one of your core assets, go get copyright registrations around all the videos. Like just do what it takes to take care of your business, because ultimately it will take better care of you.
And how much
And
would somebody invest in those copyright registrations?
yeah, so depending on what you're registering and whether it qualifies for like a group copyright, whether you have to do it all individually, it's going to be like $65 to $85 per registration.
Yeah.
It's not outrageous.
No.
I mean, I will say I have one client who has like 289 videos inside of one course. It might be outrageous for her.
Yeah.
Most people are not creating courses that have 289 videos.
Yeah.
You might have like 12 core videos or, 10, even less than that. Some courses are done really well and they really boil things down to the essential backbone. It's better if you can do that, by the way, just from the way that people consume information.
Yes.
But that's not outrageously expensive to go protect that as a core asset in your business, even if you had to file individual registrations around each of those videos, right? And
Yeah.
the thing about copyright, because I imagine your audience is also heavily US based,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Probably a lot of the English speaking countries as well. But copyright, there's something called the Berne Convention, which is an international convention that says if you have copyright protection in your home country, your country of origin, we will honor that protection in our country. And something like 164 countries around the world have signed on to that.
Right.
Different, right? Different than copyright. So like Magic Media is your brand name, right? If you were wanting to protect that both in Canada and the US, you'd actually separately have to seek a trademark registration in Canada, a trademark registration in the US.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. And to finish it off, just one
Mhm.
final question for everybody out there. What is one call to action, something that you would encourage them to go do today or tomorrow, in the next 24 hours, something that helps them to, if they haven't done it yet, to go
Mhm.
take action on this thing?
I love that. So the first thing that you should do when it comes to legal is just take inventory.
Hmm.
Take inventory on what you have and get organized. And all this looks like is like literally put a legal binder in place. It could be a legal digital file where you put your business registration, you put your articles of incorporation. If you're a C corp, it would be your bylaws. If you're an LLC, right? Anything related to the organization of your business bank accounts, any legal documents that you have and are already using in your business, put a copy in that binder. What this does is you start to kind of build this file again of tools and resources that you will have to refer back to when certain things happen in your business or when you're growing, right? If you have an EIN, which is a federal employer identification number associated with your business, it's basically your business tax ID, right? You print off that notice from the IRS and you put it in that binder. And what it will do is it will simplify the legal help that you may need to get at some point by having all that information together.
Mm,
If there's any other issues that come up, right, you've got all the information together. And then you start to add on things like tracking your meeting minutes, like really treating your business like a business, and all this stuff goes into the same place.
amazing.
It will just make you a better business owner. And if you want, can I mention a free resource?
Yes, please. I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, because along these lines of getting organized, so there's actually two that I'm going to recommend. One is my legal basics boot camp, which also refers out to a bunch of additional resources. And that's just on my site. There's a little bar at the top, you can click through to it, but the direct link is legalwebsitewarrior.com/legal basics boot camp. So just how it sounds. And that's a free training that's going to walk you through the system that I train people on about how to think about their business. And it's, by the way, the same system that when people come and hire me for, $3,000 or $5,000 to do a business risk assessment, I walk through that system. I ask them questions about their business and do an analysis on the same thing that I teach and give out for free. So you can
Beautiful.
go grab that. But one of my resources that will help you get organized is on my blog, and I'm just going to click through and grab it really quick. And it is, and I can also share the link with you if you want to pop it into your show notes, but
Sure.
it is my important dates checklist for small businesses.
Well, that sounds important.
It is important. And as simple as it sounds, like once you go through it and actually start plugging all your important dates, what it's going to do is it's going to make you a better manager of your business, and you're going to be less prone to making simple errors that can cost you a ton.
Yes.
Like missing an annual renewal notice, or
Mm,
missing a deadline for getting your registered agent, re-registered or whatever. So, some things that you don't generally want to miss. If you plug it into your important dates, checklist for small businesses, and then you calendar those things,
yeah.
it's one of the ways you can systematize a really important element of your business and avoid some pretty hefty consequences.
It's great. So step one, y'all, is go get your binder today. Go down to your local paper store and get a big fat binder,
Mm.
and plug in those important dates. I have reminders on my calendar, like when it's time to pay important stuff. And
Yep.
yeah, it's great. I also have a folder in my email for all my contracts so that they're easily searchable when I need to search them. I often go back and be like, what did we agree on here again? And I'll like go into my contracts folder and it's easy to find. Um,
Yes.
yeah, this is great and very, very helpful. Um, do you want to just talk a little bit about what you do at the Legal Website Warrior and your membership that you have? I would love to just dig into that as well, because I think there's so many people who are listening who are intimidated by the legal side of their business. I just want to be a provider and make cool stuff for people and change some lives. But you've got what I'm just going to suggest is like you have this amazing library of templates and resources that
Mm.
are available. And what I would encourage people to do, if you don't have a lawyer right now, schedule 1 hour per week where you just work through these things. In a year from now, you're going to have this like incredible foundation of all your legal shit in order. And that is really valuable and will take care of a bunch of the underlying anxiety that you might feel about growing your business.
That, what you just said, ding, ding, ding. I wish, we could have on a billboard. One of my clients said to me, he's actually one of my Canadian clients. He's like, we finished a bunch of legal work, and he goes, I feel like I have set down a 50-pound backpack I didn't know I was carrying around.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like that's it. That's it for entrepreneurs who know that they should be tackling this, and it's just like a hard area to get their head or their hands around. But when you do, like the peace of mind you described of actually connecting with the right guy who got you taken care of in regards to all these, collaborative arrangements, it's night and day how you feel and how you show up to your business in a different way. It's a massive mindset shift.
We literally
So,
finished those royalty contracts. And one of our first musicians that we signed dropped a link to our submit your music page on our website into a couple kids music related
uh,
groups. literally within 2 days of being like, the contracts are perfect, we're ready to go. He did that, and we had like 100 musicians in our submissions folder. It was just like all of a sudden exploded. We're like, what the hell happened? And it was like divine alignment there of
You
like,
told
we
the
were
universe,
ready.
that's
Yeah,
right. That's exactly it. You told the universe, I'm ready.
we're
That
ready to receive.
that's
Before
it.
that, it would have been like, we'll get back to you in weeks. And so, there's certain things I believe, reality works in mysterious ways, and
Mm.
there's a divine alignment that has to take place. And when we can get ourselves in full alignment with what we say we want, and we can take the actions to put us in that direction, one of the things that gets us into full alignment is to get our shit together. And some of the shit we got to get together is legal, some of it is accounting related.
Yep.
Like there's other things other than just working in the business that we have to do in order to achieve the success that most of us are dreaming into with our imaginations. And this is
100%.
one
And
of the important ones.
it is. And it really is like turning on a light switch. Like, okay, done. I'm ready. We handled it.
Yeah.
Right. And the universe, and I say that, very broadly, your clients, your potential business partners, anybody that comes in contact with your business, they want to see you handling business.
Well,
And when you show them
yeah,
that's what you're doing, boom, they're ready.
and it set us up to onboard all these musicians so
Mhm.
much easier. It was just like, we listen, we're like, we love it. Our app now, we're since we went live a couple months ago, we're 600 kids songs we've licensed already. And
That's
we're keep onboarding more. Every
amazing.
week we're releasing new music, which is amazing.
That is
And it's
amazing.
because these agreements are just like, we got everything in place. We built great onboarding systems, and now we can just play the game, which we're trying to play.
Well, I love that. And the last thing I'll say, because you keep saying the word systems, it's legal when it's done right is a system in your business that supports all your other systems,
Mm,
support your marketing, support your client enrollment. It supports, the ways that you grow your business through bringing other collaborators, independent contractors, et cetera, inside. Like it is when it's done right, it's a system that supports the other systems in your business. And I love that as a systems thinker. Like I love describing it in that way to people.
beautiful. Okay. This was great. I will share a bunch of links in the show notes for everybody to check out wherever you're watching or listening to this one. And Heather, thank you so much for taking some time, for coming to drop down some legal advice for us. Free legal advice, everybody. You
I
heard
love
it
it.
here. Yeah,
I love it. Well, legal should be more accessible. So I will also put a final pitch in to say that if you're like, I still don't really know what I need, like I have so many free resources available on my site. I try to make it very readily accessible so people can start to make those right decisions for themselves.
amazing. Do you, just by chance, this is just creative off the top of my head idea, because I was in the middle of it with a client before this. Do you have a self-assessment form that you've built where people can go through like a list of questions to identify what their gaps are and how to prioritize what to set up? And that'd be
Oh, it's
fun
a
to
great
make.
question.
Be fun to
So
make.
yeah, I basically do have one in the form of an application to
Yeah,
join my programs.
cool.
But people could go, you could just click through on my site. The Work With Me will take you both to the Catalyst Club and the Legal Valet program. Underneath that is the Ultimate Legal Toolkit, which is what you were talking about.
Yeah,
That's essentially access to the database of everything that I've built for
amazing.
people in this space. Yeah, huge, huge resource, massively undervalued from the standpoint of what it costs you to get access. But the application to those higher level programs will actually walk you through where gaps exist in these types of businesses. It's
Amazing.
very informational. Yeah.
Cool. This is
Yep.
great. Thank you,
So
Heather.
good to see you. Thanks
Great
for
to see you
having
too.
me, Bradley. Look forward to reconnecting.
We'll do this again. Thanks, everybody.